Picture this. Tehran, 1953. The streets are alive with this incredible energy and tension. A young Shah is clinging to power.
And a charismatic leader, Mohammad Mossadegh, is challenging the very foundations of, well, everything.
It's a recipe for a whole lot of drama.
And that's precisely what we're diving into today.
We're taking a deep dive into Stephen Kinzer's book, All the Shah's Men, An American Coup and the Roots of Middle East Terror.
This book, it's not just history, it's a warning.
A warning about what?
The events Kinzer lays out, they're like a political thriller, full of intrigue and these high-stakes moves, but with consequences that still echo today.
In the Middle East and well beyond.
Exactly. And we'll be using excerpts from the book to try and uncover the truth about the 1953 coup in Iran.
So we're talking pivotal turning points, the players behind the scenes.
And the revelations that will leave you questioning, well, pretty much everything.
I'm definitely intrigued. So where do we even begin with a story this complex?
Well, Kinzer takes us back to the early 20th century to really set the stage. You have to grasp the context.
Okay, so paint a picture for us. What's going on in Iran at this time?
Iran was struggling.
Struggling with?
Poverty, the desire to break free from, colonial influence, caught between its people wanting self-determination and the interests of these powerful foreign nations.
Sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, a powder keg waiting to explode.
And at the heart of it all was?
Oil.
Okay, oil.
Yes.
So how does that play into all of this?
The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, or AIOC, had a stranglehold on Iran's vast oil reserves.
And the AIOC was?
British-controlled.
So you can imagine the resentment among Iranians.
Oh, absolutely. They're watching their nation's wealth being siphoned off while they're struggling to just get by.
It's a classic tale of exploitation, unfortunately.
And that's where Mohammad Mossadegh comes in.
He was?
More than just a politician. He was a symbol. He championed democracy and stood up against this foreign exploitation.
A true hero of the people, it sounds like.
He was a man of principle, opposed Reza Shah's rise to power.
Reza Shah.
Right. And Mossadegh even endured years of exile and house arrest for his beliefs.
Wow. That's dedication.
Huh.
So what happens next?
Well, in a remarkable turn of events, he makes this triumphant return to politics in the 1943 elections. He wins by a landslide.
What a comeback story. So this victory sets the stage for
his showdown with the AIOC.
This is where things really start to heat up. Right?
Exactly. It's 1951. Mossadegh, now Prime Minister, makes a move that sends shockwaves across the world,
Great.
Nationalizes the AIOC.
Whoa, that's a bold move. What was the reaction?
It was a declaration of independence, a challenge to colonial dominance itself.
I bet the British were thrilled.
Oh, they were furious. Kinzer captures their arrogance perfectly, their refusal to even acknowledge, Iran's desire for self-determination. They miscalculated Mossadegh's resolve.
So what about the U.S.? Where do they stand in all of this?
It's interesting. President Truman tries to mediate.
Trying to.
Walk this tightrope between supporting Britain, their ally, and recognizing this global rise of nationalism.
A tough spot to be in.
Absolutely. Kinzer digs into the approaches of Truman's ambassadors to Iran, Grady and Shepard.
Grady and Shepard, what were their takes?
Well, Grady sensed the changing global power dynamics. He recognized the legitimacy of Iran's desires.
So he was more sympathetic to the Iranian cause.
Yeah. But Shepard, he was stuck in this colonial mindset, failed to grasp the depth of Iranian sentiment.
So you have these two contrasting views within the U.S. government itself. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it adds this whole other layer of complexity to the story.
So with all this international pressure, what does Mossadegh do?
He decides to take his case to the world stage.
By?
Appearing at the United Nations in 1951.
What happens there?
It's more than just a speech, it's a performance. He uses the platform brilliantly.
In what way?
To appeal to logic and emotion. He frames the issue not just as an economic dispute, but a fight for Iran's very soul, its right to control its own destiny.
Powerful stuff.
It resonated deeply, especially in the U.S., where he was often seen as this champion of democracy.
Battling against imperialism.
Exactly. But behind the scenes, a different story was brewing.
Oh, what do you mean?
The election of Dwight Eisenhower in 1952 brings change to Washington.
How so?
The Dulles brothers, John Foster, a Secretary of State, and Allen at the CIA, they usher in this new era.
A new era of what?
Cold War paranoia, a much more assertive foreign policy.
Oh, wow. That sounds ominous.
Kinzer reveals how the Dulles brothers saw the world, colored by fear of communism.
And they believed.
Any challenge to the Western order had to be met with action, covert or otherwise.
And the British saw an opportunity here, right?
Oh, absolutely. Desperate to remove Mossadegh, regain control of that oil.
That's awkward.
This new American administration as their chance. They ramp up their efforts, trying to persuade the U.S. to join a covert operation to topple Mossadegh.
And that leads to
Kermit Roosevelt.
Kermit Roosevelt,
Mm-hmm.
as in grandson of President Teddy Roosevelt.
No way.
Yep. A CIA operative tasked with orchestrating a coup.
Which was codenamed
Operation Ajax.
Operation Ajax. What did that entail?
Oh, it was a whole web of intrigue.
Yeah.
Clandestine meetings, secret agents, and this carefully crafted propaganda campaign.
All designed to
Undermine Mossadegh's popularity and create the conditions for his downfall.
And who were the key players in this shadowy world?
Kinzer introduces us to some, including the Rashidian brothers. Iranian agents working for the CIA played a pivotal role, stirring up unrest, spreading rumors, bribing officials.
So it sounds like they were instrumental in paving the way for the coup.
They were. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The first attempt to depose Mossadegh, it actually failed.
Oh, really? Tell me more about that. Led by Colonel Nassiri, a spectacular failure. Raised the stakes, of course.
So what did the CIA do next?
They launched this full-blown propaganda war. They forged documents, planted stories in the media, even staged riots to create this image of chaos.
Like Iran was on the verge of collapse.
Exactly. They exploited existing tensions, religious and political divisions to manipulate public opinion.
It's crazy how far they were willing to go.
It is. Yeah. And one of the most fascinating parts is how the CIA used psychological manipulation against Mossadegh himself.
Psychological manipulation. How so?
They exploited his character traits. Loy Henderson, the U.S. ambassador, orchestrated this bizarre campaign.
What was it?
It played on Mossadegh's sense of hospitality, his compassion.
Using it as a weapon?
In a way, yes. To disarm and distract him.
That's incredible. So did these manipulations work?
They led to a crucial turning point. Mossadegh's decision to ban public demonstration.
He was trying to.
Restore order, of course, but it played right into the hands of the coup plotters. He inadvertently cleared the path for the opposition.
It's a reminder that even good intentions can backfire.
Especially in the world of international politics. And so the stage is set for the dramatic events of August 19th, 1953, a day that changed Iranian history forever.
Welcome back to our deep dive into all the Shah's men. Last we left off, things were coming to a head in Tehran.
It's August 19th, 1953, a day that would change everything.
And Kinzer doesn't hold back. He takes us right into the heart of the coup.
It's a vivid picture. Violence, confusion, the brutality in the streets of Tehran.
Pro-Shah forces just storming government buildings.
Yeah. Fueled by CIA money, emboldened by all that propaganda.
Clashing with Mossadegh supporters.
And in the end, seizing control of the capital.
It must have been terrifying for people caught in the middle of all that.
Oh, absolutely. Kinzer captures that. The human drama.
The stories of everyday Iranians.
Their fear, the uncertainty. It's like their hopes for a democratic future were just crushed.
All because of foreign intervention. It makes you think about the real cost of these kinds of events.
It does.
Beyond the politics, their real lives impacted. So, what about Mossadegh in all of this?
Kinzer describes his final hours with a sense of tragedy. Mossadegh as a man betrayed by those he trusted.
Unable to hold on against such overwhelming force.
It's heartbreaking.
His arrest, the trial.
And then years under house arrest, this leader who dared to challenge everything, just crushed.
It's a sad end to his story.
It is. And what about the Shah? He returns to Iran. Triumphant, but
forever marked by how he came to power.
Exactly. This wasn't a popular uprising.
It was a coup engineered from the outside.
And that fact, it casts a long shadow over his reign.
And I bet it contributed to his eventual downfall, too.
Absolutely. And the aftermath of the coup, it was brutal.
Intense repression. You mentioned Savak, the Shah's secret police?
They unleashed terror, silencing anyone who disagreed, imprisoning, torturing suspected opponents.
Kinzer doesn't shy away from the dark side of the Shah's regime.
He exposes it all. And it's important to remember, this regime was propped up by the West.
Supposedly in the name of freedom and democracy.
The irony is, those methods they used to suppress dissent, well, they just fueled more opposition.
They created the perfect breeding ground for those radical ideologies that would eventually bring the Shah down.
Right. It's like the coup, meant to stabilize Iran, actually paved the way for the Islamic Revolution in 1979.
The one led by Ayatollah Khomeini.
Exactly.
So Kinzer's arguing there's this direct line from the coup to the revolution.
He is. The coup discredited secular nationalism, you see, created this void for legitimate political opposition.
Which allowed figures like Khomeini to step in.
Exactly. And that resentment toward the U.S., for their role in the coup, it played right into Khomeini's hands, gave him fuel for his anti-Western rhetoric.
I'm thinking of the hostage crisis in 1979.
A direct result, many argue.
52 Americans held hostage for over a year.
It solidified the image of the U.S. as the enemy in the eyes of many Iranians.
And it cast a huge shadow over U.S. policy in the region.
It did.
Yeah.
And it's not just about this chain of events, you know. Kinzer wants us to think deeper about the historical forces at play.
It's not just one event in isolation.
No, it's centuries of struggle. Iran trying to find its place between tradition and modernity, always grappling with this legacy of foreign intervention.
It sounds like Kinzer goes deep.
He does. He talks about this ancient Persian concept, far, this idea that kings had to earn divine blessing by being moral and just.
Far. So if they lost this far.
It was the duty of the people to rise up.
Wow. So toppling unjust rulers is deeply rooted in Iranian thought.
It is. And this helps explain the reaction to the 1953 coup, you see.
It was seen as foreign powers propping up a ruler who'd lost that legitimacy.
Exactly. And then there's the influence of Shia Islam. Kinzer traces that. It became the dominant faith in Iran. He focuses on the story of Imam Hussein.
Who was he?
A central figure in Shia Islam. His martyrdom became a powerful symbol of resistance.
So it's almost like this historical parallel to what happened with Mossadegh.
In a way, yes. And the recurring theme of oil. It's Iran's lifeblood, but also this source of conflict and exploitation.
Kinzer reminds us that it's about control.
Who benefits from Iran's vast wealth? The AIOC's dominance, it mirrored those exploitative practices of past empires.
Fueling resentment for decades.
Exactly. And Mossadegh nationalizing the oil industry.
A long overdue act of defiance.
Right. Reclaiming what belonged to the Iranian people. But then the coup happens, orchestrated in part, to give control of that oil back to the West.
Just solidifying those suspicions.
Yes.
That foreign powers were only interested in exploiting Iran.
Kinzer also introduces us to some of the players in this drama. We meet Ayatollah Kashani, this firebrand cleric, a staunch nationalist, supported Mossadegh at first, but later became a tool of the CIA.
Wow, what a turn. Any other interesting figures?
We get a glimpse into the world of British intelligence. Monty Woodhouse, pulling strings from the shadows.
A real spy master.
And then there's Robin Zahner, this scholar, a former spy. He advised the British on Iranian affairs.
Sounds like someone who knew Iran well.
He did, but he had his own biases, too. It's fascinating.
These individual stories make the history feel so much more, well, real.
They do. And of course, we can't forget the Dulles brothers.
The architects of U.S. Cold War policy.
Men driven by this fear of communism, convinced that covert action was necessary.
Their decisions had far-reaching consequences.
They did. And that brings us to the core of Kinzer's argument, that the 1953 coup was a major turning point.
Welcome back to our deep dive into all the Shah's men. We've walked through the events that led to that fateful coup in 1953. We've explored the history, the culture, and we've seen the Shah return to power.
But the story doesn't end there.
It never really does it?
Not with something this significant. It's time to look at what happened next.
The fallout.
Exactly. And Kinzer really pushes us to grapple with some uncomfortable truths, you know?
About foreign intervention, covert operations, and
the legacy of this coup. It continues to shape things today.
The coup was initially seen as this win for the West in the Cold War. But
it ultimately backfired. Big time.
Yeah, it seems like it created more problems than it solved.
It sowed the seeds of resentment, instability.
And extremism.
And it plagued the region for decades.
Let's talk about some of the immediate consequences.
Well, the Shah's regime became incredibly repressive.
Oh, right. He was emboldened by the coup.
Backed by the West, he consolidated his power, turned Iran into an authoritarian state.
Where any kind of dissent was.
Crushed. Savak, the Shah's secret police.
They were brutal.
A symbol of terror, torture, imprisonment, assassination, all used to silence opposition.
It's chilling. Kinzer doesn't hold back in his descriptions of Savak's methods.
And again, this was a regime the U.S. considered an ally. supposedly in the fight against communism.
So much for freedom and democracy.
It's a dark irony, isn't it? Because the very methods they used to suppress dissent.
They just fueled more opposition.
Exactly. They inadvertently created the conditions for the Islamic Revolution.
By discrediting secular nationalism, leaving this void for
more radical ideologies to take hold. And of course, Khomeini was able to capitalize on that resentment towards the U.S.
For their role in the coup.
Gave him this rallying cry against the West. Think about the hostage crisis.
1979.
American embassy stormed.
52 hostages. More than a year. It was a defining moment in U.S.-Iranian relations, solidifying that image of the U.S. as the enemy.
And impacting U.S. foreign policy ever since.
But it's bigger than just specific events, isn't it?
That's the point Kinzer makes so well. He wants us to think about the ethics of it all, you know?
The morality of foreign intervention.
These powerful nations manipulating smaller countries. This illusion of control.
Which so often leads to disaster.
The unintended consequences. Yeah. The blowback. It's a pattern, isn't it?
And the 1953 coup is a prime example, a cautionary tale.
That short-term gains can destabilize things in the long run. And Kinzer digs into the impact on the CIA itself.
What does he say about that?
Well, Operation Ajax seems successful at first.
At least on the surface.
And it emboldened the agency, reinforced this belief in covert operations.
As a tool of foreign policy. But didn't that lead to
a series of disastrous interventions in other countries? Absolutely. Guatemala, Vietnam.
Further damaging America's reputation.
As like the 1953 coup became a template.
A blueprint for regime change.
With often disastrous results. And Kinzer doesn't let us forget the human cost of all this.
The lives shattered.
The hopes dashed. The trauma that lingers for generations.
It's easy to get lost in the geopolitical chess game and forget about the individuals impacted.
That's what Kinzer does so well. He reminds us.
So, all the Shah's men, it's not just about the past.
Right. It's a story for our time. It's about power, the limits of intervention. It's about unintended consequences.
It forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about, well, America's role in the world.
Exactly. To think critically about our actions and the impact they have. It's a story that stays with you.
It makes you think. And if you want to explore these ideas further, we highly recommend checking out All the Shah's Men by Stephen Kinzer.
It's a must-read.
You can find a link to purchase the book in the episode description. Until next time, keep exploring.
Keep questioning.
And keep diving deep.